Hey, that's it. We are live. Good evening, everybody. Today is Monday, the 3rd of December, 2018. And good evening, chat room, everybody in the chat room. Patricia's got some problems coming on, so hopefully she'll be on shortly. Internet problems again. Anyway, Maria and I were talking about that. But on the panel, we have Maria Wheatley, who is a second-generation dowser who is into archaeology. And she's found elongated skulls in Somerset, isn't it, around Glastonbury? And she not only does all those things and is really good friends with Brian Forrester and was on last week with Brian Forrester, she's written another book called the Druidic Soul Star Astrology book. And today she's going to do a reading on me.
Wow. Yes, I've calculated your chart, and what the Soul Star Astrology does is it converts your natal chart, which I know you're from birth chart, which birth chart, you have to know your date, time, and place of birth. You have that a birth chart is cast. Then from that chart, to get to your past lives, there's a universal symbol of the heart chakra. It's a six-pointed star surrounded by 12 vermilion petals that represent signs of the zodiac. And whatever planets fall in that star, and it's ever so easy to calculate that really kind of gives us an insight into your most significant past lives. Not all your past lives, but the kind of significant ones. And that's what I did. I transformed your birth chart into the sign of the heart chakra to see what planets fell in that kind of symbol.
Very interesting indeed.
So, shall we get going on an interpretation?
What made you do this book then, Maria, then?
Sorry?
What made you do this book? Sorry,
what made me do the book? That's really interesting question, because there's an ancient site near Stonehenge, and it's called the Codford Circle. And it's really high up on elevated ground, and it's about sort of 5 to 7 miles from Stonehenge. And I was up there one kind of late evening, actually, and the stars were coming out, and it was a really beautiful, beautiful, clear night. And where you're on this elevated ground, it has the dome effect of the stars. You just don't get in towns and cities these days. And I was looking up at the stars, and all of a sudden I got this inspiration to think about astrology on a different level, and to think about the ancient Druids, because this site was used a lot in the Iron Age by the ancient Druids. And I just got the inspiration to do it from that ancient site. And it was really a beautiful evening, and it was almost like the stars spoke to me, without sounding too imaginative and fantastic, but it really was. And it took me some time and some research to understand how I was going to explore this branch of astrology for the book. I'm really proud that Dolores Cannon's company, Ozark Mountain Publishing, did actually publish this book, because Dolores is the world famous past life regression therapist. There is no one on planet Earth that was better than Dolores Cannon. So to have that sort of endorsement was very lovely, actually.
Yeah, you told us that the other day. I bet that is. Yeah, she seems a really nice person. And I was sort of telling you a bit about her with her regressions, wasn't I? That when she regresses people, they all, doesn't matter if they're small or old or whatever, they all say, I've come here to help.
Yes, I mean, Dolores really put people into quite a deep trance state. I would say more so than the average past life regression therapist. Although I do past life regression myself. I didn't train with Dolores. I became Dolores's sacred site tour guide. That's how I got to know Dolores Cannon, because I took the tours out to Glastonbury, Stonehenge, Avery, etc. And she quite liked me, because I had a background of past life regression as well as being a tour guide. You know, I ticked a couple of boxes, I think. Yes, and Dolores really got an understanding about, you know, a kind of, if we all kind of raise our consciousness, we can have a kind of new place, a new earth, a new beginning for humanity in a way.
Yeah, nicer consciousness.
Hmm?
A nicer consciousness. You know, that's the bit we're here today. Our consciousness. So it'll be a nicer consciousness if we all understood more, maybe.
Yes, I mean, I think that's, very important for humanity at the moment to really try to raise their own consciousness and vibration a little bit more, to tune into the kind of higher energies and vibrations that are all around us, and that really kind of lift us up at ancient sites. And this is what that ancient site at the Codford Circle did for me. It kind of just inspired me. Some people would call it a download, other people would use different words. So like a really inspirational moment. And the Druids would call this the Arwen. The inspiration is the Arwen. So I really did feel inspired, and just began to do readings for people over many years. And everybody kind of said they felt they resonated with this branch of astrology. They kind of felt that was them. And in fact, one of Dolores Cannon's past life therapist, qualified one, is a lady that was studying dowsing with me for I can't mention her name. Obviously, these things are quite personal. But anyway, she did past life regression with one of Dolores's students, qualified regression therapist in London, and then decided to have a soul star with me. And I got the same kind of countries, the same kind of experiences, not identical, but very, very similar. Because she said, I don't know, Maria, I don't know if I just made it up. But it kind of gave her the confirmation having this reading. So I know that it's quite accurate because it has been tested out.
So I was just muted. Yeah, so yeah, you've got a big history of all this then, Maria. And also the elongated heads is thank you to you here, isn't it? You found them and started to study them, and most of them are women.
Well, a lot of men and women and children that I've gone on to discover. It started off to be a woman in the Stonehenge environs. Yes, I've discovered the elongated skulls of Stonehenge, and it was really an untold history. And again, I really found that out through a mystical art called dowsing. That I just kept getting this dowsing mark on a map, which turned out to be the largest long mound in Northwest Europe, and inside was a woman, and I investigated her, and she ended up having a very, very long skull. So I think the mystical arts can help things like archaeology, us understanding things on a deeper level. It doesn't always have to be the intellect. It can be quite often kind of right brain, the intuitive, the creative side of us that can lead us to the answers of age-old questions.
It's a bit of a shame. Ooh, bit of feedback there. You need to turn it down or something, Maria. It's a lot of feedback came through just then.
Sure. Okay.
Just going to say the long barrow. It's a bit of a shame, isn't it? It's really starting to cave in, though, isn't it? It's really quite damaged now. Hello?
Turning it down.
Yeah, don't turn it down too much because we can't hear you. Oh dear, we're all right now. Don't worry. Just a lot of feedback came through just then. I was just saying that the long barrow is quite damaged now, isn't it?
And you're breaking up, Karen. Yes, the long barrows around the Stonehenge environs, of course, are all on military ground now. So unfortunately, what happens is that, until very recently, they've been cordoned off with fences around them, but they were used for the tanks to go over, and a lot of damage was sustained. But still, despite all of that intrusion, they still remain for us to see today if we can get close enough on the days that you can visit the Salisbury Plain. And as long as a red flag isn't flying on the Salisbury Plain, you access the particular parts of it.
Mm. You're talking about Stonehenge, aren't you? Wow.
I'm talking about the Salisbury, the Salisbury Plain area that surrounds Stonehenge, that contains an awful lot of ancient earthworks, including the long barrows that housed the long skull people.
Anyway, do you want to do this reading, Maria?
Yeah, well, when I cast your chart and put it into the symbol of the heart chakra, you have quite a mixed bag of experiences in past lives, Karen. You really have. You really have quite a profound spiritual heritage. I'm going to turn first of all to a very distant planet called Pluto. Pluto got downgraded recently by astronomers to be, quite a small planet. Nonetheless, in astrology, it's the most distant planet often, although Neptune can be a distant planet as well. And because it's so distant, it represents a very distant past life. So you're a very, very old soul. And Pluto is often associated with long buried and lost continents and towns and cities, for example, like Lemuria. Although I'm sure it's not just Lemuria that's an ancient lost continent, or indeed Atlantis. There were many of these that, became so it's like that. You come from an ancient civilization, and I'm just using the word Lemuria, to try and get an image going. In this past life, because it's Pluto, Pluto quite often associates to male energy, because he was lord of the underworld, Hades, in Greek myth. You're probably a male in a past life, and you had interests in psychology, and you had quite profound clairvoyant skills. And I think in this life you helped a lot of people, and you studied the occult mysteries of life and death, and you worked alone in this past life. So you have inherited from this past life clairvoyance, an interest in the occult, the ability to divine. I mean by that tarot, astrology. You've probably got interest in that even now. And you do need a time to withdraw and recharge your battery. So as much as we're coming to in the next life, you like being around people, there's a part of you that really needs to withdraw away and kind of just be by yourself, for yourself, and recharge yourself. Because in this life, there were times when you did work alone. So some very profound and deep skills were learned in that very, very distant past life. Hello?
Wow, you said distant. Did you hear me? You said distant past life.
Yes, in a very distant past life, so we're talking millennia ago, a long ago, because your kind of spiritual heritage comes from a very old soul, because you have Pluto in your chart. Not everybody has Pluto in their soul star chart. So yeah, like I said, I think there's times in this incarnation where you need time to withdraw, and it's probably where you've got your interests in the occult, or the interest in divination systems like astrology or tarot or something along those lines. I think would appeal to you in this incarnation.
Yeah, it still sounds a bit. So there's a bit of feedback thing going on. Have you got headphones, Maria?
I have got headphones. I can go and get them if you want. I'll get them now.
Yeah, I think that'd be better, because this keeps getting this blast of feedback. Do hang on, everybody. Oh, so what's everybody think then? Oh, dearie me. Taking in what she said. I would have said that it sounds quite like me in my life today, to be honest.
Okay, I've got the headphones on now. How's that?
It's a little bit better. It's still fading a little bit. You fade
Hello?
out just a little bit. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Is the feedback gone?
Yes.
Great. Good to go.
Yeah, I was just saying it feels what you've just said sort of is, well, I don't know where I am in my life now.
Right. Well, this is kind of looking back to to see where we get our kind of in this life, and maybe when we come on to your next past life, which again was very distant, because we're now looking at the planet Uranus, and again that's a very distant planet. So we're talking a long time ago. And in this past life, you were probably very open minded. You were concerned with truth and facts. And you didn't really have a consideration for tradition or the need to be approved by others. You were a humanitarian, and you had a sense of brotherhood with people from all walks of life, for all cultures. You were very intuitive, and again, you had interest in science or the occult. And then you had very unusual friendships, and you were fond of group activities, whereas in the Plutonian past life, you tend to work alone. Thinking that this past life, because it's associated to Uranus, and this is where in Soul Star you get a lot of the traits of past lives through the attributes of the planets, which are, most of them are very ancient. I think if you did marry in this past life, it was kind of almost like a bit aloof at times. You could be quite impersonal in that relationship, but you had a great sense of quality. So in this life, I think you've inherited the real desire for truth, which can be at sometimes probably a little bit idealistic. You're not too interested in tradition. You like group activities, and you have this real belief in humans, and you love to see different cultures and understand people. You don't have any kind of prejudice or anything, and I think that's born from this past life when you were very open-minded. So yeah, so that's some really positive traits coming through there,
You know whether
especially
I'm
the
male or female?
not too sure about that one, to be honest, because that can be either way. That can be, male or female. So I'm not too sure about that. But certainly, I think that's where you got your strong desire for the truth to come from, because that's was the real kind of soul lesson of that past life, was to uncover and understand the truth and realize in the brotherhood of man and woman, and to embrace people from all walks of life. So I see you in this incarnation as being very open-minded, truth seeker, and you understand people, I think, on quite a deep level, because in the Plutonian past life you have that kind of interest in psychology, and in this past life you had a kind of concern for the brotherhood of humanity.
I'm very empathic today. So even though you're talking about my past, it's today as well. Yeah, I understand what you're saying there, but that's slightly different people, weren't they? One was one way and one was a bit the other way.
Yeah, one worked alone, Pluto, and with Uranus, I think you were quite in a group, uh, working in a group around people. That's why I think you do like being around people, but there are times in this incarnation where you probably quite enjoy being on your own and recharging your batteries away from people, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand that. I used to be a bit more go 24/7, but as I've got a bit older, yeah, I need that bit to sort of unwind. Yeah, get that.
Right. Well, now we're coming to a couple of planets. We're coming to the Moon and Chiron in quite a sensitive position of the soul star chart. And the Moon is quite interesting when it appears in somebody's chart, because it can really link into a soul group. And normally it links into the soul group of the female bloodline. So that's your mother, your grandmother, a daughter, a close female friend, that type of relationship. It's about the female bloodline. And you've been in or incarnated in previous lives before. In this past life, you were very emotional, and your emotions probably influenced your health. And you know, it's almost like you wanted to be really creative and create a beautiful home as your sanctuary. The home was very important to you in this past life. You may have had and undergone some dietary concerns, like around the stomach or colon, something around that area. So I think if in this incarnation, when we look at the kind of spiritual heritage, if you get really upset, I think it could affect the stomach area quite a bit. But one thing that comes out in this past life, and it comes out in another, is that you're not really a 9 to 5 sort of person. You know, you really were quite an independent type of person in this past life, and you didn't like routine. And you probably lived in a cool place because the moon's associated to cooler climes, as it were. So that could be in places like Scotland, Ireland, or the Nordic countries, you know, Denmark, Norway, etc. So that was a past life where you were very connected to your family on the female line. You all were coming not just from that soul group, but a kind of psychic connection that you all had and a psychic ability that you all had, because the moon is often associated to magic and that kind of real emotional sensitive side of ourselves. So you might find yourself at some point in this incarnation being drawn to those countries like Scotland, Wales, Ireland, you know, those Celtic countries, or those Nordic countries as well. Which, like I said, you know, Denmark and Norway, because that's where the moon is associated in terms of countries. So in that past life, you were definitely a female, incarnated with your female bloodline before, and that's where you had a great deal of sensitivity, and you had a gut reaction to things as well, a very deep, intuitive side to that past life as well, and a very feminine past life. So because that was all about the home and building up a home, and karma often plays out in the polarity. So for some people, it could mean, yes, I want a really secure home in this life, in this incarnation, or it can mean, you know, I've done that before, and now I want to kind of wander off and do as I please, you know, because it can be quite a polarity. But I do think that's where you had a natural psychic ability was handed down to you on the female bloodline.
Well, Maria, I went to a medium about 15 years ago. First of all, I'm half Welsh. So my mum's family come from Merthyr Tydfil, and he told me just what you said. He said that there's something in the bloodline of the females of your family, and it goes in all the females all the way down, this psychic ability. And yeah. So yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I think that's quite strong, mainly because, you know, when we think about a kind of soul group connection, it's about, you know, yes, handing something down in the bloodline, like I said, but more importantly, experiencing each incarnation together. Yeah, so it's like, you know, you're a soul group that keeps experiencing things together. So that's quite profound. And it's interesting as well that that associates to like a Celtic country such as Wales. You know,
yeah, he says
so
it's like, but we did hear the other day that when we were on with Martin Kenny, that witch isn't a bad word. He said we're witches. The medium years ago, we're witches. Come from witch line.
Yeah, that's not a bad thing. Yes, 10 out of 10 if you're a Wiccan is what I say. That's for sure.
Mind you, I think all men say that about women, don't they?
Not when I'm around. But yeah.
Yeah, so I relate with all that.
Yeah, so that's your kind of like female bloodline background. Now, when we come to another planet, this is a male planet this time called Chiron. And Chiron is often associated to ancient Greece, mainly because he was defined to be the so-called wounded healer. And astrologers have been using Chiron since around 1977. So it's a relatively, new kid on the block compared to the ancient Sumerians and Babylonians and Egyptians and Greeks were writing about the other planets. So it often represents something inside of us that can need healing on one level. So when we look at this past life, you were definitely a male. You were probably interested in healing on some level, very sensitive to energy, actually, but energy to place as well as people. So by that, I mean by place, you could, go somewhere and kind of sense something in this life about place. And a lot of people are sensitive to people, clearly, but you're sensitive to people and place. And you became very sensitive to the thoughts and feelings of others. And sometimes you used to take on their energy. You were very close to nature. You liked trees and plants. You were pretty interested in herbalism in some way. And you were interested in growing your own food. I was associated to the Mediterranean areas, around Greece, etc. You had a love of nature, like I said, very sensitive to other people and to place. So in that past life, it was about the soul lesson. If we think about the planets are our great teachers, Gaia is our teacher, and what Chiron was teaching you in that past life was deep sensitivity to people, to nature, and to place. So I think, that if you went out into nature and in this incarnation, obviously you went out into nature and you felt the kind of trees and plants and felt the wind and the rain, it would really have quite a profound healing effect on you because Chiron is, after all, the wounded healer. So I think you could really self-heal quite beautifully through nature itself.
Wow. Yes, I'm trying to get back to the nature bit because I do live in a town. I've lived in the country. I grew up in the country and I miss the country. But living in a town, you get used to town, don't you? It's got street lights, shops just around the corner. But all the other stuff you said is me now. It's really crazy because it's past stuff, but it's me now. I'm very sensitive to others. I was telling you before it came on.
Sure. Absolutely, and I think that's where it's got it from, Chiron, the wounded healer.
Mm. Well, so far, I think it's pretty accurate what you're saying there. Because obviously me and Maria haven't really talked very much, just a tiny bit before we came on.
Yes, that's right. And what I love about, our spiritual heritage and our kind of look back, if you will, through past lives, it does make us what we are today. So some people could have the planet Neptune in a challenging position, and could relate to certain fears and phobias. And in past life regression, actually, one of the things that I was trained to ask somebody is about birthmarks. We have a prominent birthmark that can often indicate some kind of trauma in a past life that's literally left its mark. So, for example, around my neck, I have what's called a T-stain birthmark. It's sort of slightly darker color than my skin. It's not really so noticeable now, but it was more noticeable when I was younger. And I remember when I was being trained in past life regression, my tutor at the time, it was a wonderful tutor, said, that could relate to a hanging incident, for example, or restriction around the throat area, being strangled. So birthmarks can give a lot away to the kind of experiences we might have had before. And during one past life regression that I experienced, I was hanged as a witch, actually, probably in Salem. But it gives us ideas. The other kind of quite practical way that we can access information about our past lives is in one's home. Do you like a particular era of furniture? Do you like a particular era of artwork? Do you get drawn to a particular culture, be that ancient Egypt or megaliths? Or do you collect things that are quite profound that could indicate, the type of experiences you had in a past life? I mean, for example, I do collect swords. I have a sword collection from the Bronze Age right up to the ceremonial Templar era, and swords have always fascinated me. And in one past life, again, I've had quite a few regressions because I teach students, and often they regress me. I was very much on the battlefield with a sword, so maybe that's why I've collected my swords. But we can even look at our own daily life and think, well, why was I drawn to that particular painting? Why was I drawn to collecting Victorian furniture, etc. So that's quite fascinating, just looking at our own lives to try and understand lives that we lived before this one.
Have you ever done a reading and you've gone, oh, we haven't really got any past lives? Just asking. Do most people have past lives? Like there's a number of past lives, or is it that some people have more, some people have less?
In the soul star, some people have more and some people have less. I haven't known somebody yet that doesn't have anything in the star, but that would be quite intriguing because that would probably indicate like a new karmic cycle or something coming in. Some people are said to be at that point in their spiritual evolution on the wheel of life where they're on a point of a new beginning. But personally, I haven't met that. Past life regression work that I've done in progressing people either. They've always come up with a past life or an experience associated with something quite profound. It's the type of things that I normally get back on regression. It's an interesting question, an interesting concept nonetheless.
Yeah, it's a bit hard, isn't it, when you're actually going to be talking about your personal life on a live hangout with goodness knows how many people will end up seeing this hangout. But when I had, obviously, I've had my astrology chart done before. They said, I've heard it before, that they said I was an elder that's come back.
You're definitely an old soul. You're definitely an old soul. And when we look back to the Plutonian first past life that I described, that's when you were taught about the mysteries of life and death. You had a very deep and profound training on a long lost continent. Now, whether that makes you an elder, which you could easily relate that to, then yes. But nonetheless, I think in that past life you had a profound training as well as a kind of natural talent. And in the lunar one, where it's your female bloodline, I think that was a natural talent passed on through the bloodline. Do you see what I mean? But I think it is well profound, structured, methodical training in the ancient mystical arts.
A lot of it seems that I was there to help people one way or another.
That's right. I mean, certainly in the Plutonian past life, I think you did help a lot of people. And I think, like I said, you have inherited from that past life clairvoyance, interest in the occult, like I said, and also the ability to divine. Because I think if you turned your hand to something like tarot, runes, astrology, angel cards, whatever is one's interest and attraction, because in a previous life that you've had this profound occult training in the mystical arts, it would come quite easily to you. I mean, okay, everybody has to study, everybody has to learn attributes of the planet or the tarot, the 78 keywords of the tarot deck, as it were. But nonetheless, I think for you, it would come quite easily.
Yes, here I go on a media platform. I've done mediumship myself. I brought people through, and I also used to do a lot of tarot readings for people and myself.
Right, yeah, and I think that has its genesis, its root in that Pluto past life. So that doesn't surprise me at all that you said you've done tarot, you know, because it's just you have the ability to divine. And well, you see, all the kind of lessons that we learn as our soul develops over time, over past lives, that information, that experience is stored in us, in our DNA. So at any time, if we meditated on, you know, who was I in that past life? Okay, I had an interest and a training. If we kind of attune to that energy, it's almost like a kind of seed that starts to think, I want to flower, you know, and that information from the past life can come through in this life through, you know, dreams, inspirations, creativity, whatever. They kind of really do want, it's all about soul growth in a way. And the wonderful thing I like about Soul Star with working with the planet, the energies and the attributes of the planets is if we look at, we all live on Gaia, and what a beautiful planet we live upon. Really is an Eden for many. But the other planets as well, they want us to grow and to, you know, raise our consciousness because the planets, you know, they're billions of years old. Gaia's 4 billion years old. Imagine the immense wisdom in her and in all of her solar family that she's with. They all want us to grow in consciousness. And if we see all of these planets, it's living, it's breathing, then if at any time we want to link into their immense wisdom, as long as it feels right and you know you understand that you come from the heart with good intent, you can link from your heart to the heart of the planet, a kind of beautiful light cord to communicate with planets. Because you know, in ancient times, yes, you had a lot of written documentation from places like Babylon, Sumer, Egypt, Greece. But in our lands, the Druids, they learnt by a bardic tradition, an oral tradition. And I think as well, what the Druids did is they communicated directly to the consciousness of a planet rather than reading the attributes of it. They linked in their consciousness to a planetary consciousness. And through meditation, we can do this today. And it can be quite a profound understanding of planetary energy if we just move away from our kind of everyday existence to a planetary existence. Then I think humanity can learn rather an awful lot from this solar family that we live amongst.
Yeah, and that lunar bit is quite sort of prominent to you anyway, isn't it? Because that's what you've realised that Silbury and Avebury is all about, isn't it? And that with the long barrows, it's all lunar stuff.
Well, that's right. I mean, if we look back to the ancient cultures, such as the long-headed, long-skulled people of the Neolithic period of ancient Britain, for instance, then they were a goddess culture, and they were very much into aligning most, if not all, of their monuments to very complex lunar alignments, far more complex than solar alignment. The solar alignment isn't that difficult to follow because you only need a couple of years and you'll know exactly where the sun rises at the solstice, at the equinoxes, and at the winter solstice. So the four cardinal points. But the moon is much more complex and as well profound because you have to have either a lot of long-term observation or understanding of the moon's movements, because sometimes the moon will be at a particular point and you'll have a cloudy night. It might be at a particular point and it'll be in the daytime. So it's very hard to really get a grips with, but the ancients did with ease. They didn't have a computer. When I worked out one of the lunar alignments of Avebury, I worked it out using some shareware software, and I thought, you know, I'd phone up Greenwich, the astronomy centre there, just to double check. So I was going to put it into print. And they used some software to check it out. I said, yes, you're correct. We are all using software. the ancients didn't need that. They had an intimate understanding of the planets. And I'm not just talking about the observation of astronomy. I'm talking about linking in to the planet's consciousness. That's what I think our ancient ancestors were at. Wow. Not just the physical, but they were getting into the metaphysical understanding of a planet.
Yes. Obviously, all that plays a very big part in astrology anyway, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, I think it's, about the physical, the metaphysical, and having a holistic understanding of the planets and of the influences. Because if we look back to some very ancient astrologers, such as Claudius Ptolemy, he studied in the wonderful ancient library of Alexandria in ancient Egypt. And he was, obviously reading the papers and the manuscripts or the scrolls, or whatever was there. And from that, he wrote a very famous book, still in print today, called Loss. It's 10 books all collected in one. He looked to the symbolism of the planets in relation to countries. So he would look at England, Germany, parts of Europe, and according to the ancient astrologers, that would come under the fiery, warmongering, some would say, over-assertive planet Mars. All kind of main wars that have been initiated, they do come from that Mars area, even including tribal warfare of Africa, that all comes under the planet of Mars. So Claudius Ptolemy, he really looked in depth at certain points and planets and how they influence people. So he would say the people of England and Germany can be over assertive. That's how they would see that, because it's relating to Mars, for instance. Then what Ptolemy said in his book was that the sacred meeting point of two kind of latitude and longitude lines represented a very holy place on earth, and that was Aleppo. So when we look back to the ancient texts, they viewed places like Syria to be holy lands. And it's such a shame that, there's a war out there. And the very sacred land that looked like Strawberry Hill, very wide finished off, is just being completely, well, the whole place has been sadly ransacked. But that was, according to ancient astrologers, one of the most holiest places on earth, and very important to Gaia. But anyway, when we come back to your charts, we're going to have a look now at Neptune.
Right.
Now, Neptune links quite often to the lost continent of Atlantis, because Plato, if we listen to what he said at the center of the metropolis of Atlantis, there was a beautiful shrine dedicated to Poseidon, Neptune. And there was beautiful springs there. One was hot and one was cold, and it irrigated the entire lands of Atlantis. So everything was lush and growing and very fertile. So Neptune is associated to the lost continent of Atlantis. And again, in this past life, you're probably a mystic. You helped society in some way, or you were in a community in Atlantis that helped people in some way. You had a good sense of morals, and you were quite liberal, though. And you really were interested in either earth wisdom, that's a bit like what I do, geomancy or dowsing, or equally astrology and the stars, that kind of earth and the stars. And you weren't really that materialistic in that past life. So if we look on a practical level, your spiritual heritage today, you may find that money comes and goes in your life. You could be extravagant at one point, and then kind of want to save the next. And what's coming through quite strong, same with the other lunar past life, you don't like 9 to 5 job, you don't like routine. That could easily bore you. There's a certain part of you which in that past life had a real need for freedom, to find out who you were and the deeper parts of life. So you may like, ideally, to be around water, islands, or rivers in this incarnation, although you say that you live in a city. But nonetheless, that's probably part of your
Oh, I love
heritage
the
there.
sea. That's my favourite place, is the sea. My favourite
Wow.
place. It's where I'd like to end up when I'm sort of an old granny, is by the sea.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's Neptune's very intimately associated with seas and water and also mysticism. And this is what's coming through your chart, quite strongly, is this spiritual heritage of being very associated with either the kind of science occult arts or the natural psychic arts. So I think your soul has learned kind of both aspects, kind of natural psychism, being naturally a psychic rather, and also being trained in the occult or the sciences in some ways. You've got a very broad understanding of the mystical arts, deep within you on a soul level. That's for sure.
Yes. Yeah, I felt it as a child anyway. I don't mean I assume, because that's the wrong word, but I'm thinking there's a lot of people like me who are mega sensitive from when we were children. And yeah, it means that we knew it then. You just lose it for a while and then you find it again when you're a bit older.
Yes, exactly. When you've had, so much soul experience on the level that you have, going way back in time to Pluto, then it's there and it's ingrained, and it will surface at some point. You could go through life denying it, but at one point it will pop up through an experience or a paranormal experience.
But
Something like that.
everybody's chart is different, isn't it? Like,
Oh,
you look at someone.
absolutely.
Yeah. So what's this big link for me then with this sort of spiritual caring, and maybe each life is to learn a different part of it. I don't know.
Well, I think it stems going back to like an organized training, and then through your female bloodline. That's what I think. Yeah. But when we come to a more recent past life, and by that I mean probably the medieval period, not recent as in like an era or something, we have Mars in your chart, and this is more of a kind of mundane, as it were, past life when you are male, because obviously Mars is associated with male energy. In this past life, you were quite interested in working in quite seclusion, or you acted in secret in some way. So you could have been like a spy or something like that. You were involved in a secret plot, or you were put in prison. Now, you will know that if you were put in prison, because in this life you will really hate confined spaces. So we can rule that out by how you feel about it. So it's either involved in a secret plot, or being put in prison because of being associated with something like this. So, do you like confined spaces, or you have a real hatred of them, Karen?
Oh, I wouldn't say I like them, but I spend a lot of my time in this little bedroom I've got, my third bedroom. It's like a cot-sized room. I spend a lot of time in here as if I'm in prison. Oh, dearie me.
So we can say you're more likely than to be involved in a secret plot. I think that this was for quite political reasons or religious persecution. That's what I think it could have been about, which could have been, against the government. It could have been, because you had an alchemy or something. You may have been
Obviously, one of
burnt.
the to the people things, power to the people, because I'm like that today.
Yeah. So if you were burnt, or come to a bad ending like that, like I said earlier, this normally plays out today as a birthmark. Yeah. So we can join the dots quite easily by ruling things in or ruling things out. But nonetheless, I think you were involved in some kind of political secret plot. So in that past life, it was quite different from the more deeper side. So your soul has had, quite a few different incarnations and experiences. But the sole lesson, I think, from that Mars life, uh, being involved in, secrecy, is possibly the need to be more open and trusting in this incarnation, because you were so secretive about what you were doing in that past life. So there might be times in this incarnation where you keep things quite close to your chest, as it were.
I do
And
sometimes.
to
Actually, no, I'm more of a heart on the sleeve. So what you see is what you get. And sometimes with my wisdom or knowledge, whatever it is, sometimes people don't like it because I'm quite upfront. I don't do it here. I can't. We're on a public platform, and it's not about me usually, the platform. It's about the other people. But, I'm generally quite upfront.
Right, that's really good then, because then the sole lesson of the need to be more open and trusting. Obviously, you've evolved that, and you have gone through that, which is great. And you don't make the same karmic mistake twice. Once we have a kind of recognition of who we were, what we've done, and we move on, then really you don't make those mistakes again. So I think you've really let that karma go. You know what I mean? You've kind of said, no, I'm not going to be secretive anymore. I'm going to be me. I'm going to be outspoken. I'm going to wear my heart on
Yeah.
my sleeve. And like that. So I think that's quite poignant that, that you've completely moved on from that, which means as well, when people do this, it's about self-awareness and soul awareness on a very, very deep level. So you, in some point in your life, Karen, had that inner awareness, thinking, this is who I'm going to be now, and kind of letting go of that past. So that shows that you're in touch with your higher self. Some people aren't at all in their lives. They just kind of bimble along on the kind of drip feed conveyor belt of work, and never think about who they were, where they came from, why am I here, you know? So that does show me now that you have a lot of soul awareness, which is a wonderful thing.
Well, thank you, Maria. Sometimes it sort of doesn't feel like that when you're so sensitive, though, and a lot of people around you aren't. I find that a bit weird, really.
That is the moon coming through, that deep sensitivity coming through, and that's something that one will just have to try and put up a little bit of psychic protection, possibly, a little bit of a barrier at times against people, but in a very loving and dynamic way. And psychic protection is always a good thing, I think, even if I do a course or a tour or something, I always surround myself in beautiful light, and it gives me a bit of a protection from people's thoughts and feelings and opinions. And I feel safe and protected, within that light energy zone. So I think that's always a good thing for sensitives to perhaps do
Always
if it feels right.
myself. I'm protecting myself against outside.
Yeah, layer of cotton wool.
Whoa. So sometimes you can tell whether I'm male or female. Do you know what I am in this one, or it could be either?
That was male because it's Mars. That's
Well,
quite, yeah. Yeah, that was definitely a male
maybe that
role.
tells you then. Maybe a few of the other ones were female and this one was male, because this one was different, really different.
Yeah, it was very, very different. It was You see, I mean, this is the thing about, you know, our soul evolution. You can have very, very dynamic past lives. In one of my past lives, for example, through regression, I was a very warrior type of person, you know, with no real kind of mercy at all. But in this life and in other lives, I did the opposite. You know, I played that karma out and became more caring and loving and understanding. So you can have these past lives, real polarity, but it shows evolution of the soul, you know, and it shows dynamic understanding of, growth, spiritual growth, and deep understanding. So that's why I think that one kind of popped up, which was a bit different. And even in the next past life that we're coming to, this one's a little bit different as well. Because in this past life, we have Mercury in a position, and Mercury, yeah, it can be male or female, but often Mercury is depicted as a male, especially in Greek of their god system, as it were, and their gods and goddesses. So yeah, Mercury could be male, but sometimes I think it can come out female. It's certainly associated with ancient Egypt, Mercury, and in this past life, you were quite knowledgeable, quite grounded. You liked reading, be something like, you know, higher education, and you were quite a worker, and you were probably ended up teaching as well. So this again is quite a grounded past life. It's not sort of too much into the spiritual realms. You know, you were very fond of knowledge. You like books and etc. But because it's in what's called the eighth house, Mercury in this position can often imply that at an early age in a past life, you experienced the death of a brother or a sister, or somebody that was quite significant in your life at that time. And the death could have been caused by a disorder of the nervous system, or the, you know, or the lungs, or somewhat like that. So you experienced in this life, yes, you were knowledgeable, and, you know, you like books and reading, to be a teacher. There was a profound experience early in that life where there was a loss, possibly of a sibling or something. We get these attributes from what the ancients wrote about things like Mercury in the eighth house. You know, it's come down to us from astrologers, like I explained earlier, like Claudius Ptolemy. All of this information of Mercury means this here and Mercury means that there. So I can see in the past past lives that I've described, very mundane, but this one had a kind of a bit of a twist. But nonetheless, I think what you've inherited from that experience was a love of knowledge. Probably as you kind of grew up, you became more interested in reading and expanding your kind of intellect the older that you got, because like in this past life, you started off and you ended up being a teacher. So I do see maybe a love of books and reading and trying to get to the bottom and being quite knowledgeable about things.
A bit more earthly.
Yeah, 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 definitely there. So again, it's like a different experience that you had. Do you have any brothers and sisters now?
Yeah, I have one brother.
And are you close?
No.
Okay. Fair enough. Yes, so we're coming to the, let me just
I said before we came on air that I'm quite an empathic person, but my family isn't, none of them. They're very, it's like they're not mine at all. They're very different to me.
Well, it sounds like, you know, with looking at your kind of past lives and spiritual heritage, you've had deep, sensitive past lives. You've had some mundane ones, like we've just sort of, you know, heard. But I really do feel that it's just a natural part of you, and maybe your kind of family that you chose, because it's always been said, you know, from
We chose
Dolores.
our own family, supposedly, didn't we?
Yeah, exactly. You should exactly. So what was going on there, Karen? No, yeah, but exactly. You know, it's all about kind of understanding us and allowing us to grow. At times, you know, if you don't fit into your family, that's not going to be easy. You know, none of that's not easy if you don't get that kind of understanding from our families. So we're coming to one of your other past lives, and I think then that's about it, because you.
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry, you just went for a second. Carry on.
Yeah, we're coming to sort of the last past life here, which was represented by the planet Venus. And Venus always represents a woman. And in this past life, which again is a little bit more mundane than the very distant ones, because Venus is quite a close planet to the Sun, and therefore it can represent a more recent past life. Probably, I don't know, you're sort of going back to the Victorian era, or maybe a bit before that. But you know, not as distant as the other ones, as it were. And in this past life, as a woman, you are emotional and you were sensitive. You didn't have any children. You chose not to have children and opt for a kind of married life, but single. And you were very, maybe again, this was kind of from the moon previous past life, which increased your sensitivity then, because you really did feel that everything influenced you. If you went out in the street, you know, the people influenced you in some way. So in a way, you kind of kept yourself to yourself. You were with somebody at that time, but also quite a kind of single, determined woman in her own right as well, but quite highly emotional and oversensitive to opinions. If somebody said something to you in that past life and it cut a little bit deep, it would really cut deep for you. You'd be upset for, you know, quite some time. So even though you were kind of opted for marriage with no children in this past life, you still kind of kept your single independence as well. So that's a kind of quite amazing, I think, for that time, if indeed it was the Victorian era, to be quite strong and quite bold as a woman.
Yeah, I kind of, yeah, think about that time. Maybe a little bit after that, maybe like 1910, 1912, something like that. You know, I see all that music, and I'm really not into that. When that comes on, I can dance away to it. I think, no, I don't like that music.
Well, that may well come from.
Hello?
Hello.
Sorry, it did it again.
I don't know why that's happening, actually.
It's not you, Maria. I think in the past I've been told I was a suffragette.
Ah, okay. Well, that really does make sense then, to that kind of single determination, even though that you were in a relationship. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah. Would have been a bit out of place, supposedly, with what we've been told. We women were treated like then.
Yes, but you know, thank goodness for these type of women in that era that, you know, boldly went before where other women hadn't in previous times. So it's that in itself is amazing. All in all, I think you had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 past lives in that kind of star symbol. or making a kind of different experience. And so from a suffragette to somebody that's been secretly involved in something, to a spiritual heritage and a female bloodline. It's like I said, it's a bit of a mix.
Do some people, when you do the charts, they do the same kind of thing each life they have then? Or is everybody?
No, sometimes it can be a few similar things and then a kind of complete change if the soul wants to learn a different soul lesson. That's how it happens, and even when you have like a reading like this, or I think you said you went to a medium and they said about the female bloodline, like I said.
Yeah.
They come out with very similar things. It might not be identical, but there's this kind of golden thread that people recognize in your soul, whether it's a medium talking to you about it, or an astrologer or whoever. There's always that kind of connections that are made that sound quite similar.
Yeah. Well, I kind of understood everything that you said in that reading. I understood it all. Woo.
Wow. Well, we're going to have a look now at what's called transits. And transits are a future way of looking at astrology. They're kind of like a bit of a prediction of what's coming up, or potentially what's coming up, forecast. And what transits are, it's looking at the positions of the planets in your birth chart to where the planets are now. And if they form a relationship, then that would mean something. And by a relationship, I mean you could have a planet in your birth chart that is 120 degrees away from a planet today in the ecliptic belt, and that's called a trine, which is a positive transit, because they have trines and squares and oppositions and conjunctions. And these transits start to trigger things within us. And in a way, they are a mirror to what could happen. They're not written in stone. And there was a very famous astrologer, and I loved what he said. He's called Alan Leo. And he said, "The wise man rules his stars, only the fool obeys." And that implies that you have this wisdom of the transits, but you don't follow it blindly. It's a kind of guide. And one of your transits coming up is Neptune conjunct the moon. And a conjunction means when the planets are very close together, almost like touching each other. We could visualize it that way. And you have both of those planets in your soul star. So it's quite deep and quite meaningful for you, because we notice that the moon in your past life was that female heritage that we discussed. So when Neptune and the moon meet each other, and this will probably be coming up around sort of March time for you, and it's a long transit that can last for about 2 years. So it's long haul. And for some people, it really does trigger any latent psychic ability. Okay, so anything that's within you like that, I can see over the next 2 years you naturally develop in that, and it will come more and more to the fore in your life in some way. For some people, these feelings of the psychic energy and the sensitivity and the intuition rise into one's consciousness can make them feel a bit confused. Yeah. So as long as you kind of realize that any feelings that you have about people or places is this like real kind of latent psychic talent coming to the fore, then I think you could really use this and become very wise and intuitive, and allow the kind of sixth sense to truly expand. It's a very spiritual transit. You can Google it in your own time, Neptune conjunct the moon, to hear another astrologer's perspective on it. But it's really about raising your sensitivity. So gosh, if you're saying you're already very sensitive, then it's
Oh
probably
dear.
the psychic side.
Oh dear, everybody, watch out.
Yeah, the psychic side will come up in volume, that's for sure.
It's been there with me all my life. Years ago, it would almost look like I could go to a photo album and pick a picture and go into this picture. But, you know, whoever uses mediums and psychics, they can't necessarily say a time, a place. They can't do all these things. They have a vision. And this would happen to me, except I never saw nice things. And so in the end, I stopped doing it because I only ever saw death through someone else's eyes, but I never felt anything. That's the really weird bit. If you do any of these things, quite often there's no feeling in it because it's not your feelings. It's different. Like here, people can walk up to me and I think, whoa, they're not very happy. And you know, I can feel their feelings a mile away. But that stuff, it didn't have any. It was information. And yeah, it's already happened. But I didn't like what I saw. I wasn't seeing happiness and love. I was just seeing accidents.
Well, I think this time with these two planets, because they're also both in your soul star, that it may change a little bit because time has moved on, your energy has moved on. I think the planets really do want to communicate the better psychic side to you, possibly, or another branch of psychicism to you. Maybe not the one that you've experienced before. So it could be coming in a new guise. It might start off in its old guise.
Would this same thing be happening for a lot of people at the same time?
No, this is quite unique to you. It's in your chart. It's a transit, your personal transit.
Right. It's not that a lot of people will get that moon transit then. Conjunct, rather.
Yeah, Neptune conjunct Moon. Other people will be probably having that transit when you look at how many people on the planet. I'm sure that they are, but you know, it's about a 2-year transit. It's quite long, so it's going to take some time to unfold. But I think if we're aware that that's going on in the background, then you could utilize that and use it to your advantage, and maybe to the advantage of other people as well.
Right. So more helping then.
It could well be, because Neptune is quite in its greatest guise is unconditional love to a certain degree. It's about having that kind of mysticism, and mysticism is really about allowing us to communicate to others, to help them on their path, to be that guiding light for them at some time in their life. I think that that's all wrapped up in that Neptunian transit as well. And people that are those guiding lights for others always reap the rewards on other levels as well. So and it can make us more creative, more poetic, more bardic as well. It can increase one's creativity, be that in photography or art or the performing arts or whatever. It can increase our kind of latent talents in the arts as well as mysticism.
Yeah, this stuff, you're already doing astrology then. You've just moved it now to soul, the Druidic soul star astrology, yeah?
Yeah, the focusing on past lives, because as a regression therapist, I like past life regression on that level, and I like past life readings as well as my regression work. So for me, it's a kind of great kind of combination to have a look at somebody's soul star and to regress them, to see what comes up, through their own voice and through their own experience of their past life regression. So I really do feel that once we kind of have a little bit of understanding about our past, and we can heal things or let certain things go in our lives, we can really move forward spiritually, and our consciousness can understand the past and raise us up a little bit in awareness. And it can be quite a healing moment in past life regression as well. You can take somebody to what's called the healing room, which is all set up as part of the regression process, where you can receive very deep, profound healing as well. So I see past life regression as being a beautiful form of therapy as well.
Yeah, I would say that, you know, over my years, once I'd had my birth chart done when, you know, when I was in my 20s, I kind of felt that I got into astrology myself, but not like you, because it is so complicated. It takes years to learn astrology with all those conjuncts and squares and whatever it is, all those things. I couldn't do all that, but I myself like seeing people's birth charts. I said to you before we came on, I like to see their rising sign, their moon sign, their sex life, the relationship one. Well, that just tells me what kind of person they are. It just does.
Sure.
And not just that. I know this is slightly differently, but I have a book up there called Druidic Love Signs, and that's Indian, but not a Native Americans, the one with the dots on their head. And in it, they have more signs per month. Like Gemini, there's 4. So you start off with wait a minute, what am I thinking? There's 3 a month. So in Gemini, there's a male snake, a female snake, and a female dog. In a sense, those traits of that person as a male will still be female, if you understand what I mean. Oh, that's quite interesting. It's another take on astrology. But yeah, I thrive information like that. I always like understanding people. It's just been my way. Reading, astrology, being sensitive, empathic. So it includes everything that you've said today.
Yeah, well, I think that's all a part of your, you know, your soul's journey. I mean, this is what we're looking at. You know, we're looking at the soul's journey through time, through different incarnations, different experiences with our families, different experiences with people that we meet. Some for good, some quite challenging. And I think past lives can explain those kind of inexplicable things in our life. Why did I meet such and such? And why did he go off and disappear, or she go off and disappear? Why is my son behaving this way or something? I think it can really answer quite a few questions for us that, you know, that we find difficult to understand. And that's where I think any form of past life therapy can kind of jump in and say, oh, you know, this could explain that, or at least kind of give a flavor and a slight taste of the understanding of it. If not in its totality, it can say, well, it could be because of this. And that goes for fears and for phobias, for our likes and our dislikes, whether, you know, I mentioned you like being around water because of Neptune and Atlantis, to you know, to one's sensitivity. All of it can be seen through the lens of past life therapy.
Does it tell you, even though you're looking at past life, does it tell you like, oh, she's got 10 more lives to go, this is her last one? Have I learned all my lessons?
No, Soul Star won't do that. But Dolores Cannon had a very good technique, actually, and she invited me over to Arkansas in the States to give a lecture. She put on what's called the Transformation Conference, but forgive me if that's wrong. I think it was called that. And she did, as we know, past life regression, but she also came out with forward life progression. Okay. And in the forward life progression, she looked at 1 year ahead, 3 years ahead, or 5 years ahead. She chose the kind of odd numbers. And after going through a kind of guided meditation, visualization with Dolores, you would see yourself. You could pick whatever you wanted. Is it going to be a year ahead? Is it going to be 3 years? Is it going to be 5 years? And you pick one of those timelines. And then you would start to see yourself, what you wanted, the sort of aspirations, or, you know, where would you want to be in that time frame ahead? And you put the energy into it, you kind of really experience it, and that seeds that kind of forward life progression. So Dolores's technique was looking not hugely ahead in the next incarnation, but to go for the short term. But also, you can use regression to move that timeline ahead to say, where are you going to be in your next incarnation? But you'd probably need to be under hypnosis in regression for that, rather than looking at something like soul star reading.
I'll ask you something, because obviously you know that I'm a bit into this anyway, and it's in my bloodline, as I've said. I was quite into this a few years ago, but I just found that too much being in spirit world. We're here, we're humans, we live here, this place. So coming here a few years ago, I just thought, no, just giving it a rest because it's just too much. But what was I going to say? I've just lost thread now. Whenever you hear a medium speak, they never say that the people have come back. It's like whoever they're talking to is still there, wherever there is a different dimension, the other side, heaven, whatever you want to call it, they're there. It's like they talk to those members. They never say, oh, your great auntie, Uncle Albert, whatever it is. They've never say anybody comes back. So what's the difference then with those souls, or whoever they are, that have gone over, whoever we were, to this soul, which then moves on to other lives? If we're sort of something there, but we don't have our soul. Our soul's now in another life, doing something else.
That's a really, really good question, a very profound question, one which I don't know whether I have the full answer for. But cultures looked at reincarnation on different levels. So to the ancient Celts, for example, you spent a long time in the underworld. You didn't kind of quickly reincarnate. So you'd be around for a long time in the underworld. And maybe that's where, mediums would talk to. Or could it be that, life, death, and the soul's whole migration is on completely different levels? You might have, one soul experience being able to be accessed by a medium, and that part of that other soul is then going to be, incarnated again. Really, I think we're only at the kind of brink of understanding these type of issues. And there's so many people have different ideas and experiences. It's hard to know the actual truth of the matter. And also, in one regression that I did, and this was quite a strange one. It was during my training as well, which I was glad of, because it was so odd. I was regressing a chap and thinking I was doing, really quite well, because he was starting to speak and, conveying a story. And I was trying to access more information on the story. And then I realized he was talking about the Vietnam War, but he was too old to have been there. He would have been alive, in the 70s. I thought, what on earth is going on there? And we had a discussion afterwards with the tutor, and it came to the conclusion that that person experienced. I mean, he was really talking about it. He was there. He was experiencing it. It's almost like his kind of psychic side went there. So could it be that even in fact some reincarnation experiences are a collective, like the Akashic records of man, and some people could have a past life experience, but it may not have been theirs personally. It was like plucked from the Akashic records. So yes, I've had some quite unusual experiences with regression that do leave these very, very big questions, a bit like the one that you've just asked.
Yeah, what about, like, that around, this is changing the subject a little bit, but around Avebury, even the Long Barrow, there's a lot of orbs.
Yes, you will always find that around ancient sites, and even visible lights like earth lights, they can appear and manifest. So yes, so it's like that spiritual energy is attracting. And if you do see an earth light in this area, as I have myself, and you can communicate to it by literally
Sorry.
talking to the earth light, and you say to it, you know, could you please go a little bit to the left, you'll find the earth light will start moving slightly to the left. And I had one earth light experience. These aren't the kind of invisible orbs, these are the actual lights that you can see. Was with my daughter Raven, and it literally manifested in front of us, only for about 30 seconds, enough for me to capture it on my camera. So I think there's a lot of kind of activity around these ancient sites that we can interact with. You don't have to be a passive player in this. You can literally interact with these lights. And I think they are definitely conscious, because you can communicate to them. You can say, please go to the left, please go to the right, and they follow that directive.
So if they're in a different dimension, it might be just how we see them in this dimension.
Quite possibly, but again, I think
I can't remember his name, right? And it's really quite famous. He's a guy from the 70s. He's talking about, well, what he's getting to is the fourth dimension, but he goes through the first, and basically he's explaining that a one-dimensional person can just go backwards and forwards, and then, oh, a 3D apple comes in. And even though the 1D knows and senses there's something there, we can't see it. And even if the apple lands next to him, the 1D will only see the points of the apple, not see the apple. So if this is how he was explaining what if you were one dimension seeing a third dimension, they've obviously gone to another dimension and we can't see them exactly. We see them as orbs or whatever, feel them, can't see them because they're in a different dimension.
Well, yeah, that's a good explanation, and one that seems to be, you know, very relevant. And yeah, I agree. I mean, we literally are, as a collective humanity, only just understanding what I feel our ancient ancestors had the answers to thousands and thousands of years ago, and we're kind of catching up to the ancient past. So,
Weird,
and I'm
isn't it? If you were at school, it's all poo-pooed, isn't it? Oh, history, don't want to know about that. Oh, stupid Stonehenge. And now you get here and you think, Avebury's so real. And it's just like all this stuff which they've completely covered up, which loads of us in the chat room want to know much more about, all the things they're covering up, all the pyramids they're hiding, the whole thing. We want to know much more about it.
Exactly so. And this is where I think these metaphysical tools, be it dowsing or past life regression, can kind of turn a page of the ancient past and we can read it again. So, you know, it can be quite fascinating what some people come up with in the past lives. It's regression, especially. It's like holy history sometimes. And that can be quite a profound moment when somebody's, especially because I'm into ancient sites and history. So if somebody says anything like that, my ears, you know, pick up. And you can start asking some very, very profound questions.
It is annoying, though, isn't it, that we probably won't be able to ever know properly the past, because we've had mud floods and there's just so many things have gone on, and then they're covering everything up. But a lot of us, it's a bit like when you wake up and understand what's really happening to you or around you, it's suddenly like you realize it's like you've got different parents suddenly, and you've been like adopted, and suddenly none of that past is the truth anymore. And so we all want to know what's behind us, even though it is really important to go forwards as well. But to me, I think you're missing so much if you don't understand any of your heritage.
Yes, I mean the cover-ups that have gone on and are being uncovered by a lot of top authors, must be said. But yes, it's, to understand who we are, we need to know about who we were so that we can really understand what the ancients were doing in the ancient landscape. And we're only just touching the surface at the moment to who these people were and why they built these monuments. And like you say, there's cover up after cover up going on to deliberately either mislead us to the truth of the past and to try and distract us. No, let's distract them with something.
It's that one, to distract us. I don't know why they're so frightened of us understanding our past, really. I mean, like, it's only even, like, for me, I visited Silbury Hill, and it's in the pyramid of the world, and people like it's a pyramid, and John Cowery and Brian Forrester. But to think that there's probably a load more of those dotted around this place, and they won't own up to that because it would change everything to know that there's a pyramid here. But they do. There is documented as a pyramid. But the people who live here don't know. Don't you think that's crazy?
I know, and even in my hometown of Marlborough, I have in this one, not me, the Marlborough College has in its own grounds, there's the sister to Silbury Hill, called Merlin's Mount. So there's another pyramid.
What? In another one? What, you mean the little step one?
Yep, that was made into like a garden feature. So that's why it got cut out. But originally, it was about half the size of Silbury Hill, and it's made identically to Silbury Hill. And it has, and there was another one in the area, which was a little bit sort of further south. Interestingly, the third great mound was in the middle of Stonehenge and Avebury at a place called Marden Henge. Now, within that henge monument that probably had standing stones, it had a sweat lodge, sophisticated henge monument. It had a very, very large mound. But because the geology is a little bit different in the Pewsey Vale, where Marden Henge was, hardly anything of it exists today apart from bumps in the land. It's green sand, whereas in Marlborough, Avebury, Salisbury Plain, you're on what's called chalk bedrock. Okay, so they built this mound, the ancients, of the green sand and in layers, very similar but not identical to the other two mounds. But when the antiquarians were searching through the round barrows, occasionally they found gold. They became treasure seekers. And they put a huge shaft into the Hatfield Mound, which is its common name. And unfortunately, it started to collapse because it wasn't made of the chalk block. It was made of sandstone. So they're mounds, very substantial mounds in this area. So it's not just Silbury. It was Merlin's Mound and the Hatfield Mound. Go over to Stonehenge environs on private land rented from the military. You have a farm, and you have what's called the Enford Barrow, which is huge. It's not the size of Merlin's Mount or Silbury Hill, but it's gigantic nonetheless. And I'm sure that would be very similar to Silbury Hill in its construction.
Hello?
Hi.
Sorry, you just faded off a bit there, the very last bit. Say that bit again, sorry.
Well, I was talking about the Enford Barrow in the stone.
I told you when you were on last time that all those years I've driven past Marlborough College and never knew that Merlin's Mound was in there. And of course I found it. We went to Silbury Hill the week before you did with Brian Forrester, and I stopped there and I thought, there it is! I can see it! I can see a bit of Merlin's Mound! All the times I've driven past, never known it was in there. They've ruined that one, haven't they? They had a water cooler or something in it.
That's right. But, if you look to other private schools, as I've said in lectures and things, they all have mounds on their grounds. Eton has a mound. so it's like having the ancient energy there within the academic places. So I don't think that's coincidental at all. I was just saying about the Enford Barrow earlier being in the Stonehenge environs. That's probably very similar in construction to Merlin's mound and Dilbury, i.e., it's a pyramid structure, not just a mound. As you know, John Cowie, who I know and respect very deeply, and I've been on here with him before. He's an expert in that field, and we know there's far more going on than just looking like a grass-covered mound, as you see today. But you're right. Many people in the area, they look at you as if you're half crazy if you tell them the truth that it's a pyramid.
So the one at Marlborough, you reckon was bigger than it is. So how did it lose half its height then?
Because it was made into a garden feature with a spiral pathway carved out of it, hacked out of it. Tons and tons of earth got removed to make it a kind of jolly little pathway to have, afternoon tea on top. Yeah, because that time it wasn't a college; it was quite a substantial place for the gentry to go to. So it became defaced, basically. But it's being tested.
We've got Martin Leakey in the chat room, and he's looking at masses of history and putting things together and seeing the lies himself just by old photographs. But in some of the photographs he had, when he saw towns, it always had a pyramid with it.
Well, that's interesting because one of the early surveys done by Frederick Blythe Bond of Glastonbury Abbey, he was channeling, through automatic writing, a dead monk. That's why he was finding all of the bits of Glastonbury Abbey that had been long under the ground that you couldn't see. So when you go to Glastonbury Abbey and you see all the little outlines made of previous building, etc., that's what Blythe Bond found. Through this automatic writing. Of course, the authorities got wind of it and he wasn't allowed to be the archaeologist there anymore. But anyway, he actually put in one of his drawings a pyramid structure in Glastonbury Abbey and an obelisk as well.
So you don't think the Tor is a pyramid then?
The Tor is probably quite natural because there's 7 other tors that surround Glastonbury Abbey called the 7 Isles of Avalon. And if you go on top of the Tor, you can see them all reaching out of the ground. But we've got to remember that, many hundreds of years ago, that was quite waterlogged and would have appeared like an island, the Isles of Avalon. So,
yeah, I know. I'm going to ask you whether that was true, because obviously further on down on the coast, they've shored it up on the banks to make sure the water doesn't come in. That meant that England was quite watered. It had a lot more water in it. They sailed across there. That's the story I got. They sailed to the church.
Absolutely, and indeed they did, because it was in the I think it was in the 1700s, or probably the 1800s. The dikes were built by people from Holland, because obviously they were doing that a lot in the Netherlands, and they came over and kind of did a lot of irrigation systems to make the land come up and the water cease by having all of these dikes, which still exist in Glastonbury today. But even if we look to London, Chelsea, that was like a little island as well, where there was a lot more water through being so low to the sea level in places like London and Battersea. They were in their own right at one time.
I know it's all incredible, because it's like none of this has been done properly, even though we think it has, and we're so futuristic, but we're not. Ourselves in research on this channel, a few people have done it in the past who've been on Sun and Moon, and basically it seemed that at one point there are all these electrical arkings happening all over the place, and there would be a positive and a negative. So I think the positive nowadays grows trees, and the negative has all the minerals and ions and ores. That's what's in the negative part. Anyway, the electrical arkings is like the ring at Stonehenge and the ring that Avery's been built on. They are electrical arkings, and Strawberry Hill has one as well.
Well, I think people that we well, I think, all research adds to an understanding of the ancient past. So I think, the more that we kind of have lots of different opinions and ideas expressed, then the closer we get towards the truth.
Yeah, because my vision of it all has changed. I remember thinking, what? So that was a moat they made around the stones. Oh, well, maybe Silbury Hill's where they dumped all the earth. And a lot of people don't realise that there was 2 circles at Avebury, and one of them's not there anymore. But then I went into a shop years ago there, and there was a painting up on the wall. And I said, what's that? And they said that basically was Avery, that Avery was the internal organs of a woman, going up into the ovaries. But I mean, that one now is gone for me because of the electrical arkings and everything else it means. But yeah, we still don't even know. What do you think it exactly was then? Because I've seen you. The first time I saw you was on a video. There was these Australians, and you were dowsing and you were explaining the different energy levels in the stones.
Well, I mean, one monument like Avebury or Stonehenge even has so many different facets to it, like a diamond. So it has many different things that can be used on many different levels. But for instance, on one level, they're in a much stronger magnetic field, these ancient sites, which an author called John Burke did a lot of investigation into, and found that if you place seeds within a place like Avebury that has these high magnetic fields, then if you plant the seed, it will grow twice as fast and twice as strong. And if you go to the center of the southern inner circle at Avebury by a concrete marker stone, which is commonly called the obelisk stone, and you look slightly to the left, you will see on the ground some oval shaped concrete markers, and that marked deep pits where the remains of ancient wheat ember were found. So they were putting seeds into the ground. So I think John Burke is quite correct when he says it's a high energy field that helped seed production.
Yeah, and also look at the tree roots of those trees there.
Yeah, the tree roots grow like that because beech trees can't go into the chalk bedrock. There's not much soil in a very strong chalk bedrock area. So they can't go into the soil, so they put their roots over the top of the chalk bedrock.
It's amazing, those roots.
But they are, they're very, very stunning. So on one respect, Avebury can enhance food production and agriculture. On another level, it's a fantastic calendar system to record the times of the year through its shadows that the obelisk casts on other stones, for instance. So what I mean about a place like Avebury is it has so many different functions for so many different reasons. And that's not even going into things like earth energy and vortex energy there. So they are multifaceted places that do not have one simple explanation to say it's because of X. It's because of X, Y, and Z, and A, B, C, and D as well. Many different reasons.
Very interesting. So do you believe there's any more pyramids and things around?
Well, there could well be. We have a lot of, tree covered areas. So, I mean, what's underneath there awaits, excavation and exploration. I think there are many, many, many lost sites. There's 2 lost avenues to Avebury as well. Didn't just have two megalithic avenues. There's lost avenues there.
People who haven't been there, although GoPro's in the chat room, and I went there with him in September, they are huge. Some of these stones are huge.
Yeah, one's the heaviest megalith in England, which is over 100 tons, and that's one of the cove stones in the northern inner circle at Avebury. It's huge, it's gigantic, and it's the estimated weight is 100 tons, but that's just an estimate. It could be 120 tons or more.
Yeah, it's a great. Avebury's one of my favourite places. Another one I like is Coombe Hill, which doesn't have a henge on it or anything, but there is an old settlement up there. But I was saying this the other day that I think maybe it was when you were on. I can't remember. You know, supposedly the Druids walked across the top of the hills and carried on up to Oxford because they couldn't see because of the trees. It's the only way to get around. Well, I'm not saying the trees aren't big when you're on the ground, but from up there, they look absolutely small. So I just think that was amazing. You're never sure how much of the past is the truth anymore, do you? Because you're changing it anyway, aren't you? By getting people to realise that we also had elongated-headed people here. Oh, I've lost Maria. How long was I talking by myself? No, I'm on the hangout on my own. Dearie me, she's just left. I'll wait around for a couple of minutes to see if she can come back on. How long was I talking to myself then? Dearie me. 20 seconds. Oh dear. Yeah, but you could tell that her internet wasn't particularly brilliant, was it, really? She kept going in and out. I don't know if everybody else could hear that. You know, she's quite close to me. She's only about 20 miles from me. I live about 20 miles from her, so it's not very good, is it, when the internet's like that? Not sure if she's going to make it back. It's been very interesting, though. Just to explain to everybody, she's not a flat earther, but in a sense, her finding these elongated people here, in a sense, she's treated like we are, because she's now trying to get people to understand that something else, there's a different history here now, and things mean different things. And, you know, she doesn't mind coming on a flat earth channel, so that's good, isn't it? You know, we've got to talk to each other. They hold keys. They're finding, you know, masses of information which is different to what we've been told. And, you know, she knows that Silver Hill's a pyramid. And, you know, before we came on, we were talking about the fact that they have lied about everything. She doesn't realise how big the lie is, I don't think. I think a lot of people realise how big the lie is. How many elongated skulls? I'm not sure, but she's found quite a few. In fact, I thought they were more female, but she's found male, female, and children. But some of them, the females, the way they're buried, it's almost as if the females were, I don't know, were more important sort of thing. I don't think she's coming back. And I think I'm going to end the hangout because I can't sit here talking for half an hour on my own. Yeah, it was quite interesting listening to myself on being talked out across to everybody. Anyway, the idea is that she's written this book, which is called the Druidic Soul Star Astrology book. So she has that for sale. She does readings, and it was great. She was on, and it was really nice. Everybody in the chat room, thank you so much. You know, we're a diverse group. We try and cover as many topics as we can. Tomorrow we should have on psychics and the plain truth for a chit chat. So we'll see them tomorrow. And don't forget, Wednesday we've got Martin, Kenny, and Josh coming on. Ladies' night on Thursday and Dave Murphy on Friday. So we try and cover as many things as possible. Anyway, thank you so much, everybody in the chat room. And be back tomorrow.